Hi, Living Water Church. This is Ken and Amy, and we wanted to talk to you about parenting and what a challenge that is. One of the most challenging jobs we have ever had. And you know what? It begins and never ends.
It never ends. Once a parent, always a parent.
Yes.
Even when your children are grown.
But there's been several things we've done well and several things we have not done well. And so we just thought we'd share some examples of those. So you were going to share.
So one of the things that I think that we did well, or at least we worked on, was not taking ourselves too seriously as parents. Yeah. And what I mean by that is not being totally self-analytical and self-critical, but just trying to laugh some things off that go wrong. The truth is, your kids are going to embarrass you. Yeah, I said I would never be the parent that pushed a screaming child through the grocery store. I said I would never do that, and I did that because I had to get something done. Kids are going to embarrass you.
Yes.
But instead of like crawling in a hole and wanting to disappear, just talk about it with your spouse and try to laugh it off.
Yeah,
that's what we did.
That's
what we tried to do.
We're trying to do. I think that you did better at that than I have over the years, but I've been learning. I think we're all learning to just not take ourselves so seriously, and just give grace. Give grace, not just the letter of the law. I think a lot of times I was focused on the letter of the law.
And you want your kids to be model citizens, and you want your kids to make you look good, but sometimes your kids make you look bad.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
And I think I was worried too much about that, like how people perceived me through our kids. Mm-hmm. And there's a scripture that just has meant so much to me. It's in Proverbs 29:25. It's the New Living, and it says, "It's dangerous to be concerned what others think about you.
Yeah.
But trust in the Lord means safety." And I think we can live that way almost, that we're just so concerned about that person and this person and how we're perceived, even people we don't know at the grocery store.
Yeah. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful heart is a good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones." And I think a lot of parents can live with their bones kind of dried up. Mm-hmm. Because they're too hard on themselves, they're too hard on their kids, and they have too high of expectations for themselves and their kids. So we had an experience once that we had to learn to just laugh off and not take too seriously. So one of our sons was in second grade, and at this point in our schooling years, we had the boys in a private Christian school.
Right.
And so our son was in second grade, and he had this teacher. How would you describe her?
Just very prim and proper, and you would just kind of put your shirt back together when you got around her, you know.
So stern. She was stern.
She was strong.
High expectations.
Yeah.
Like you almost felt like you wanted to have military precision with her.
Yeah.
And so anyway, our child went up to her after school and said, "I want to know what this particular word means."
Yes.
And the word that he asked her, he said, "What is the F word?"
F word.
Not the word forgiven, the F word that you're thinking, surely they don't mean that word, and we do.
Yeah.
He went up and said to her, "What does this word mean?" And he didn't know. Like, he wasn't trying to be obnoxious or crazy or interface.
He said the actual word.
He said the actual word that we're not going to say.
No, we're not. So innocently asked that question, and boy, I think she turned shades of red.
I bet she did.
We didn't see that.
I didn't see that. So he came home from school, and he said to me, "Mom, I asked my teacher a question, and she said I should come home and ask you."
She didn't want to answer that question.
So he came home. I said, "Well, what did you ask her?" And so he told me what he had asked her, and I was like, "You really didn't do that, did you?" And he's like, "Yeah, why?" And so it's like, that's where you want to like go dig a hole and crawl in it as a parent, because like, what does she think of me? And if our son had done it out of obnoxiousness or
Sure.
defiance or rudeness or disrespect. That'd be different. He didn't. He was naive.
Right.
And so, but it's like the way that we had to handle that was just to laugh it off.
Yeah.
And we tried to explain to him in rated G terms how that word was inappropriate and not a word we used, and not appropriate to ask her what it meant again.
Yeah.
But I always wondered, what did she think of me when he said that? But I kind of had to reach the point it didn't matter what she thought of me, like that scripture
True.
that you quoted.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too that even with words like that, our kids can ask questions, and I think sometimes we want to give them an adult answer, what it means, and I think that we can go too far with that. We could just simply, say it's just a bad word, and then we can talk more about it later as they mature and understand more. It's like the comprehension has to grow, and they have to be in the right place so that they're in a understanding in every way, emotionally, spiritually, in every way.
Yeah, I think something we had to learn along the way, and this example kind of helped us, is we tended, like something that we did wrong, especially with our older boys, is that we tended to over-discipline. We had such high expectations for them that we would actually discipline them for childish behavior versus disciplining them for defiance. And we had to separate the two. So in this particular case, our son didn't get in trouble because we were learning at this point, but not disciplining for being naive. He shouldn't get punished for being naive.
Absolutely.
If he had done it, to be offensive, that would be different. But you kind of have to analyze and ask God to show you what are their motives.
Right.
But we had to learn to discipline fairly severely for defiance, and then just to teach about childish behavior.
Right. And I think that, with childish behavior, when a parent's frustrated, it's easy to discipline when it's just simple, childish type of responses, and not intentionally trying to be rude or disrespectful or defiant. And those were the main areas where we disciplined, was the defiance and the disrespect, and trying to explain to them on a repeated basis that's when discipline is necessary. Consequences are necessary.
And I remember when the boys were younger, they were toddlers, that trying to teach them to obey what I told them to do. And we would actually role play it. Like I would tell them to go do something and they wouldn't do it. And then there would be a consequence for that. But then turning it around on the flip side and like role playing it. Okay, we're gonna and make a game out of it. We made a game out of like teaching them to obey, and by like saying, I want you to go grab a bottle for me for your younger brother, and they wouldn't want to do it, and so we would role play. How quickly can you grab that bottle? And just do things that make them kind of train their minds to want to obey, to think about obeying.
That's good.
I think something else I had to learn with boys too is that boys don't always hear you the first time. Like you think they're being defiant.
That's a good point.
But their minds are on what their minds are on, and I know that you can do this with me. I can ask him a question, and it's not that you're ignoring me. It's just like your mind is on something
It's
else,
engaged,
and it just goes whoop right over his head.
I think that's so true for guys, that we tend to be so focused on what we're doing that we're just not able to take in other input when we're focused. Or multitasking is much harder for me than it is for you.
Right, and so it's not necessarily defiance if your son doesn't immediately respond to your voice. It's almost like you have to get his attention. You have to get him to look in your eye, and then when you know he's with you, that's when you tell him what you want him to do.
Yeah.
But if you're expecting, especially as a mom, because we're wired so differently, but if you're expecting him to obey and you're punishing him when he doesn't do it right away, when you don't really have his attention, that's kind of, I had to learn that wasn't reasonable. Like I was being unreasonable with the way that a boy is wired.
Yeah.